Today is a bittersweet day for me because I've finally sold my Gehl, my RT210, mainly because I got the new excavator and I'm downsizing the number of machines I have. Before I got rid of it though, I wanted to go through a few things on it that after owning this for about 10 years, I've learned about the Gehl machines and how they compare to some of the other track machines that are out there and other skid steers. Today I want to just go through the things I have liked about this machine and things I haven't liked, and the things that have worked really well and the things that haven't worked so well on it. The track design that came with this is kind of like this H shape or U shape or something, but I will say that this puts low ground pressure down and it's good for that, and it's pretty good if you have pavement and things like that, and it won't grind itself down too much because of this tread pattern. But I will say, as far as traction goes on like snow, during snow and ice and even in thick mud, this doesn't really have the best traction. If you need a track with a lot of traction, the zigzag patterns seem to work the best. The other nice thing about Gehl, the way they route the hoses for the arms and for your attachments up front are all very well protected. You can see they kind of go inside the arms here, and they're solid. They're not flexible through there. All of the weak points are very well protected. Deep inside pockets, you don't have any of them hanging out. As far as working in the woods, this is about as good as it gets. There's really nothing to snag. And in 10 years of owning this thing, I've never had any issue with breaking a hose on the machine itself. So just the attachments. I'm getting down here real close to the tracks because there are pros and cons to Gehl's system here. I just want to give you a detailed look at this. One, it's fairly straightforward. It's simple. There's no suspension. There's no grease points. That's one thing that was really interesting to me, is there's zero grease points on here, that at least that I have found. There's no grease zerk in the middle because it's a hydraulic ram that pushes this wheel right here out to tighten the tracks up. And that's Gehl's patent, and their claim to fame is the auto tensioning of their tracks every time. And so as you can see right now with the machine off, the tracks are loosened up, so it saves your tracks a little bit and increases how long they last. However, one thing I've noticed with this setup is it works great in the woods, but there is a big problem when it comes to doing road work and when you deal with breaker rocks. So these go down before your final driveway surface goes in, so this will be underneath your finished gravel. And this is a typical breaker rock. I mean, this probably is on the small side, but what happens with this machine is if I'm going to come under here a little bit, if you get these rocks stuck like that and you're kind of on maybe the outside shoulder of the road itself, it will try to push the tracks off because you're kind of on a slope. And if one of these rocks crawls up underneath there, it can pop the whole track right off. So I noticed when I was using this to do like ditching and shoulder work on the outside of the road, I had the tracks come off on me like 3 different times. And then I just stopped using this machine for that kind of work, and I switched to my wheeled tractor. The reason this is so easy to do on this machine, these little cleats under here for the tracks, they go on either side of that wheel all the way around. Now if you look on some other skid steers undercarriage, those cleats are actually, there's 3 wheels up front here. There's one on the outside, one in the middle, and then one on the inside. And so these cleats here are then kept inside a channel the whole time, so it's really hard to knock those things off with one rock. But with Gehl's setup, it's real easy to knock the tracks off with rocks like this. So if you're going to be doing lots of work where you have rocks, where you're working with breaker rock and you're doing road work, I don't think Gehl's undercarriage is going to be the right fit for you. For forestry work, sticks can get in there and they don't really cause any issues. I never had any trouble with sticks causing the tracks to come off. So for forestry work, this is a good machine, and for farm work and things like that, it's a great machine. But if you're doing lots of roads and driveways, I would say that you could probably do better with the better undercarriage, because even these wheels, let me move back here. So even these like idler wheels here only have 2 wheels. Like on the Caterpillars and maybe even the Kubotas I was looking at, I'll try to get some footage of those. They have the 2 wheels on the outside, but then there's also a 3rd wheel in the middle, and it's on every single idler, and the main front wheel too. So you just get a lot more protection from the tracks slipping off. One pro to this setup for Gehl is if you do have a track come off, it's fairly straightforward to put the tracks back on. This is kind of a minor thing, but every time you fill up with this, the location of the gas cap is such that it's kind of behind this metal bar, and I don't know if this is unique to just my machine or whatever, but it's hard to reach in there and unscrew that, and it's hard to get the cap back on, at least harder than it should be. So, you know, not a big issue, but it's something you run into every time you fill it up. From an access point of view, this machine, it's not bad. It's not nearly as easy to access as like this cat excavator, but that's also kind of because it's an excavator. But I also noticed that on some of the Bobcats and other cat skid steers, the access is much more straightforward. So the only problems I've really ever had with this machine, so there's a remote oil filter here, and these hoses go all the way back and connect into the side of the machine. And if there wasn't this remote setup, an oil filter would just be able to screw into the side of the machine or the side of the engine. What I've had happen is the O-ring for this remote that was screwed in where the oil filter normally would go blew out, and that area is really hard to access without pulling the whole engine out. So I had to actually have the dealership do that. The other thing that happened with this, and I don't know if this was a big problem or what, but when I had to send this thing in to get it fixed, this turbo needed replacing because it was loose. It was about, I think it was about $600 to $800 for a non-OEM aftermarket. It's kind of the higher end non-OEM. I only had like 350 some hours on this thing when that turbo went out. So I was like, well, I'm not going to use the OEM if there was a problem. Again, I'm not real sure how big of a deal that was and how long it would last, but it's what they told me. So I just went ahead and replaced that. The air filter and the oil and checking oil and all that stuff is straightforward and easy to get to. The fuses are easy to get to. The hydraulic release for the tracks is nice for when you're, and I've got another video on that one, changing or putting the tracks back on. You got your fuel filters, all that stuff, and the coolant levels and the bottles. All that's pretty easy to get to. It's easy to clean this radiator out. These gas shocks don't hold this thing up anymore, so I have to put like a chunk of wood in here. I don't know if they ever did, to be honest with you. There might be a way to hold this up, but I haven't figured it out. So I just throw a chunk of wood in there. One of my other small complaints, the counterweight and hitch. So like if you put a ball on this hitch, you can't open the door to the machine. So it would be nice if more skid steer, I'm sure this is not just Gehl, but I had a ball on there a lot, and when you have the ball, then you can't open the door and you can't service the machine. You have to take the ball off. So it would be nice to have like something where I ended up fabricating a piece of metal that dropped the hitch down below so that I could still have a ball and still open the door. But you know, it seemed like something that they could figure out with a better door that has a gap or something for going over a hitch ball or something like that. The work lights on this thing are very well protected. I've had this thing in the woods a ton, and they've never been damaged or had any problems in that whole time. One issue I did have over here, there was an antenna for the radio, and that got ripped off pretty quick. because that's in an exposed spot on the side. So that's something that they could probably have done better, maybe put the antenna back under here to protect it. But that wasn't a huge thing because I just dealt with it. The way you lift the cab up in this thing's pretty straightforward too. There are only 2 bolts. You just take these 2 bolts out here. The whole cab tips backwards, and then there's a pin that holds it in place. But that gives you access to the pump and all of your hydraulic valves underneath. So it's actually pretty easy to do that and to clean things out under there and just check. As far as the cab goes, this cab is really roomy. It's been really nice, and I really like the pilot controls. I've gotten really used to them, and I have mine set up in ISO so that this left-hand stick does all of the driving and the right one does all of the working of the arms and the attachment. Mine had an air seat that was very nice. There's a lot of room in here, pretty good visibility, and this Gehl, unlike my other little Gehl, the RT105, there's a little bit more wiggle room for your arms to be able to open the door. So your arms could be up a little bit in this thing and you can still get the door open. With that 105, there's really hardly any margin for error. You have to have them like all the way down at the bottom of their range to get out of it. So this one's a lot easier to get in and out of. I've never broken the glass on the door itself, and I've had a few things hit it pretty hard, like limbs. So it's a pretty well built, you know, cabin glass. I did have, in my tree shear video, I talked about how I had some limbs come through this window and had to get that one replaced. So yeah, overall, this has been a great machine. There's no emissions on this one, or emission controls. So this is all pre-emission. So I never had to worry about DEF fluids or regeneration or any of that stuff. So that was pretty nice. You know, really, this has been pretty solid for me for 10 years. And I put only about 360 some hours on it in that time. No big problems to really speak of with this thing. So I enjoyed it and I'm going to miss it. And I hope you enjoyed the videos I was able to capture with it. So now that that's gone, this is the new toy that is replacing it.